How many of us are glad we serve a God that doesn't give his heart in pieces this morning? Are we thankful for that? And it's extremely important that we understand that, because when our world falls to pieces, we begin to think that God is holding out on us. But our God is all in on us, amen? He is all in on his blessings in our lives. As we launch our Win series today, we're going to be talking about what happens when our dreams are shattered. When our dreams are shattered, that's when we see God in a brand new way. And certainly that's true with the De La Cruz story. I love how the video started it out with their dedication of the quintuplets up here, but we know that it didn't start there. They didn't rewind it all the way back to actually when they had the dream in the first place. And guess what happened to that dream? It got shattered, right? They didn't even know that they were going to be able to be together as a couple. They didn't even know that they were going to be able to have children once they did get married. And then their sister passed away. And all of these things that said to them, this is never going to happen. And yet God took that little dream that they had for another sibling and gave them 5 siblings. Can we give them a hand, a big old hand over there, you guys? There they are, the De La Cruz Ohana. Thank you, guys. So excited, and we have an opportunity to continue to make their God dreams come true, because we're going to surround them. Now, I want you to picture 5 little baby acoles that you got to change every single day, multiple times a day. You know what Marcy was telling me? She said, before they're potty trained, that's 36,000 diapers that they're going to go through before they're potty trained. So you know what we can do? We're going to love them in 3D. We're starting the De La Cruz diaper drive starting here today. So here's what I want us to do. Over the next month in July, you're going to see a banner right out there under the Ohana tent. And when you're at Costco or wherever you're at, just get them size 3 and above. You might as well get a couple bigger ones too, because they're going to grow. I mean, they're going to grow. They don't stay that size, right? And that's just our way of loving them. Can we do that, Ohana? Can we do that for them? I love that we can do that we can come around and love each other in practical ways. And we see another kind of family gathering as we're going to look at the story of Joseph and learn from his story of what happened when his dreams were shattered. And we're actually, instead of starting at the beginning, we're going to do like that video of the De La Cruz Ohana. We're going to start at the end of the story. And so if you have your Life Application Bible, you can turn with me to page 61. It's in the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 50. And in your Life Connect Bible, it's page 61. And if you don't have it, it's in your notes and it'll be up on the screen as well. But where we're picking up here is the brothers, the 11 brothers of Joseph. They've all of them realized, oh my goodness, the brother that we threw down a well and sold into slavery and figured was dead is not only not dead, but is second to the most powerful person in all of the land, second to Pharaoh himself. He is in a position of power to destroy our lives. And that's exactly what they expected, because they remembered what they did to their brother. No doubt Joseph remembered what they had done to him. So you can understand why they're throwing themselves at his mercy and at his feet. Their response is expected. His response, not so much. Look with me. Chapter 50, verse 18. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. Verse 19, but Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I'll provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the 3rd generation of Ephraim's children. Also the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. Now, what I want us to understand today is no matter how great your dream is, God's dream is even bigger. You might be contending for something right now that's a blessing to you, and God's dream for you is not only going to bless you, but the 2nd and the 3rd and even the 4th generation. If you will take what little bit that you have and give it to Him, you're going to see the big thing that God is about to do. And it all starts with a promise. And you can fill that in your first blank there. It all starts with the promise, the God-given dream. And it kind of looks like this right here. When God gives you a dream, it only starts out as a sketch. It's not colored in. You don't see all the blanks filled in. You don't know how you're going to get from here to there. But it's like a kind of, God writes something in your mind. It's a sketch on your soul. It's a picture where there was a blank before. There's now something that God's beginning to form. It's an idea dropped in your spirit that's bigger than you. That's where it all starts. It starts with that promise, that God-given dream. And that's certainly where it started for Joseph. As we now rewind the story, having started at the end, now let's go to the beginning. Turn a couple pages back in your Life Connect Bible, and we're going to go back to Genesis chapter 37, which is on page 42. Genesis chapter 37. Now I want you to know real quick here, it says in verse 2, Joseph was a young man of 17 who was tending the flocks with his brothers. He was only 17 when God gave him a life-changing dream. Now, before I go on here, I want to hear, where's my OG at? Where's my One Generation Youth Ministry? You guys in the house? Okay, I'm talking to you. God said, I gave Joseph a dream at 17, and it changed his entire life. You guys just came back from camp, and I was there for one night, and I saw God moving mightily. Some of you got a dream. I need you to pay attention this morning, because God's going to show you what to do with it. What it's going to do is it's going to change your life. Don't let it go. No matter how much life convinces you, it's never going to happen. This morning, you're going to learn what to do with the promise that God put on your heart. Can I get an amen from my OG? Okay, I'm just making sure you guys are with me. No, don't be sleeping now. Don't be sleeping. Here's the deal. God gave him a dream, and this is where all of it started, the good and the tough. See, God gave him two dreams. The first was all his brother's sheaves, wheat sheaves, were bowing down to him, and he thought it would be a great idea to share that with his older brothers. And you know, older siblings always love to hear how their younger siblings are better than them. And then he decided to share his second dream, starting here in verse 9. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they were all totally thrilled to hear another dream from their younger brother. Listen, he said, you guys, this is awesome. I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Now, their reaction is kind of expected. In verse 10, when he told his father, he also told his parents too. He told his father as well as his brothers. His father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now, it doesn't tell us how Joseph presented this dream to his family, but by the reaction that we see in Scripture, it's very obvious that he probably didn't present it in a humble way. He probably didn't say, hey guys, can you pray about this with me? It was probably with a little bit of a haughtiness, a little bit of kind of a smug, like, yeah, you're all going to be bowing down to me, brother. Come on now. And they even told his parents, yeah, I don't know, you guys, I'm just letting you know this is from God. Now, was the dream from God? Absolutely. Should he have shared it that way? Probably not. But the one thing that he did right was he made the dream plain. He made it plain. He got it out there. And that was going to be important because of what he was about to go through. He was going to need to come back to this God-given dream over and over again. And it's what I want to encourage you, young people, as well as all of us that are in this room, in the overflow, watching online right now. When God gives you a promise, write it down. Make it plain. And this is what Habakkuk says in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 2. Record the vision, inscribe it on tablets, that the one who reads it may run. Why do we need to write it down? Because we need it in front of us while we're running. Otherwise, we're going to run every which way but God's way. If it's not in front of us, if we don't keep God's promise in front of us, when we start going through the rough stuff in life, we're going to forget what he said. We're going to think we made it up. A lot of times in my life, when I'm coming to a milestone in my life, I'll go back to my journals. And I was actually going through my journal earlier this week, and I found this that I had totally forgotten about. You see, when we were in the school of church planting, they had encouraged us to write down a faith timeline because we knew we were going to plant. And they told us to write down every 6 months, every couple months, what we thought God was going to have done by that month. And when it happened, we were supposed to cut it out and then put it in our journal when it happened. And so I found this. I totally forgot about this. The beginning, January of 2004. It's finally here. This is the year we will see all we have been praying and planning come to pass. New Hope Seattle will find its birthplace in Shoreline and its birth date in the fall of this year. New Hope Kapa'a is chosen to be the mother church for this new plant. Now, I was just an interim pastor at New Hope Kapa'a in Kauai. We hadn't moved yet. I didn't know anybody in Seattle. I had no idea how God was going to do this. I just knew that this was a promise that God had given me, and I wrote it down, and I made it plain. And I want to invite you to do the same. Don't go bragging about it like Joseph did. Don't go, saying, hey, look how special I am. But find a couple people that can contend with you for the impossible, for that dream that has yet to come to pass. Because it's going to be important, because right after the promise usually follows the pieces. Yeah. It all falls to pieces. You can fill that in your second blank there. It kind of looks like this. You start out with the sketch, and then everything gets smashed to pieces, obliterated. It's all over the floor. Everything starts falling apart. And that's certainly what happened in Joseph's case, right? He shared this dream. He's going to have some authority that God's going to give him. Everyone's going to bow down. And then what happens? He gets thrown in a well. His brothers leave him for dead. Then they have a better idea, and they sell him off as a slave. And then he's working for Potiphar as a slave in Potiphar's house. And then his wife starts putting the moves on him, and he resists the wife. But then he gets thrown in jail because the wife lies and said he was doing it. He was with the wife in the wrong way and violating the trust that Potiphar had in him. Now he's in jail for something he didn't even commit. And you can imagine him standing there in this dark prison going, what happened? I had this dream. I saw all these things happening, and this is not what I saw. He went from the promise to the pieces. And it describes it this way right here. In Psalm 105, 17 through 19, God sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. And they hurt his feet with fetters. He was laid in irons until the time that his word came to pass. Look at this. The word of the Lord tested him. Now, here's why it's so important that you write down your promise. Because there's going to come a point in your life, in fact, some of you in here are at that point right now, where the last thing you want to see is the promise of God. Because it's like salt in the wound. It's like a dangling carrot out there that you're never going to get. It feels like God is teasing you and messing with you, that he gave you some promise and only to hold it back and say, you're never going to get this. That's definitely how Joseph felt. He was being tested by the word of God. He's in prison, in chains. He's in pain. How in the world can this be? Where are you, God? His dream was shattered. It was in pieces. I looked at the year following, after the birth of New Hope Seattle. 1 year after the birth of the church, God had began, the dream was coming to pass. And I'd forgotten how hopeless I was, because 1 year later, the whole thing felt like it was falling apart, like it was shattered, smashed. I started having the leaders that had planted with me, they started leaving the church. And some were leaving for good reasons because they were moving. But one couple in particular, they left in a very bad way. And as they left, they started telling lies, unfounded lies about me. And other people were leaving as a result of these lies. And I would ask them, why are you guys going? And they said, well, the leadership couple, they told us this. And I said, that's not even true. And it hurt me to the core of my being. We were a young church. We couldn't afford to not only lose leaders, but people in the church. And I began to think, oh my gosh, God, it's all falling apart. In that same week where all of this was coming to light, my wife and my oldest son were sick, and I backed my car into someone else's car. Anybody have a week like that before? Right? When it rains, it what? Right. That's the place you're in your journey when all of your promises have fallen to pieces. That's where I was at. And I didn't realize how desperate and destitute I was until I started yelling at the kids and kicking the dog. And then I realized, oh gosh, I need to come to you, God, because I am not doing well. And I had to get honest with him. I want to encourage you to do the same. And I found this poem. It was actually a song, but I don't remember the melody, so I'll just read it to you if you don't mind. It was just me laying my heart out before the Lord. It says, I wonder what it is that you can do with all these broken pieces that I've handed you. Is there anything redeemable at all from this latest fall? Lord, you know I have sincerely tried to lift this load only to realize that all along I've been doing this without you. So right now, I call out to you. I've cut myself so many times on these broken things that I call mine. I see your nail-pierced hands here to take it all away. So right now, today, all you ask is that I stay true, that I simply trust and follow you, and to never take this burden alone again. Because you call me friend. And if you don't come to God with your broken pieces, you don't have to write a poem, but you do have to get honest with them. If you're angry right now, here's what happens when you're picking up the pieces. You're going to hold them in anger. And you know what happens when you hold broken pieces in anger? It ends up cutting you. Worse yet, you end up using these broken pieces and they end up cutting the other people in your life. It's not what you wanted, but because you aren't giving them to God, your anger and your bitterness and your frustration and your unforgiveness, it begins to scar you and the relationships around you. Joseph had to come to that place in that prison. I had to come to that place in brokenness in my church plant. You have to come to that place too. All those pieces, if you hold on to it, it's only going to get more painful. If you trust God with them, hand them to God, you're going to see what He can do with the pieces. And why do we do that? Well, Habakkuk 2 verse 3 says, for the vision is yet for the appointed time. Who appoints the time for our vision? It's not us, it's God. It hastens toward the goal and it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it. For it will certainly come and it will not delay. In other words, it's going to come in His timing, not in ours. And right now, some of you are in that place right now. You've got the pieces from your past and your present and your future, and they're all over, and you're sitting in a place of frustration. Even right now, while you hear this message, can I encourage you before you leave today, take those pieces and hand them back to the one who made you. Give them back to the one who gave you life in the first place. Some of them are pieces from your past. Joseph standing in that cell room, knocking his head against the wall, and the comments from his brothers playing around like a videotape in his mind over and over again, what his brothers had done to him. Those were pieces from his past. God can redeem them, but you have to let Him have them. Some of you right now have pieces from your present where you feel like Joseph in chains and you are stuck and you feel like you can't get out no matter how hard you try. If you're feeling that way right now, you bring those pieces from your present, you give them to God, and you watch what He does with them. And some of you need to give God the pieces from your future, where the future used to be clear, it used to be bright, and now it's all over the place. It's a mess, and you cannot see it. You need to give God that too. And you watch what He does with it. And you watch, if you give God the pieces of your promise, He's going to invite you into a process that's going to make you brand new. But it's not going to look that way at first. It's going to actually look like this, and you can fill this in your third blank. The process of God is the God-led timing. Now, when you're making a mosaic, you take that design that you started out with, that sketch, that original picture without any details, and you begin to put the broken pieces according to that sketch on that blank piece of paper. But then what happens is you take the grout and you have to put it all over so that all these broken pieces from your past, present, and future all begin to stick together. Now, of course, if you hang up that mosaic on your wall before the grout dries, what happens? Yeah, you've got a big old mess on your hands, right? There's a timing to the process of God. And I don't know about you, but sometimes that's where I lose it. I lose it in the timing. And here's the other thing about the process of God. Sometimes it looks like it's getting worse before it gets better. And I think there's some of us that are right there right now. We feel like God is actually making things worse. But I want you to know, if His hand is spreading the grout over all the pieces from your past, present, and future, there is a work of God going on that you cannot see. It may look like gunk. It may look like it's all getting messy. It may look like you cannot see the future, but God is at work. If you'll trust His timing, you will be amazed at what comes together when you trust His process. And if you're in that place right now, you're in good company. Think about Job. Oh, what a process he had to go through. He had everything and lost it all in a night. And he had to enter through this very painful process where he came out on the other side seeing God for himself as he had never seen Him before. Think about Abraham. All his life he had waited for the child of promise, finally receives Isaac, and then God says, I want you to sacrifice him to me. I want you to lay your son down on the altar. Well, that's a painful process. What about David? David was just a shepherd in the field, and Samuel anoints him to be king over all Israel. So why is he now running for his life for years from a crazed maniac king who, if he finds him, will kill him? What kind of process is that? God, hello, where are you? Moses? I thought he was going to be the deliverer of Israel. Well, he had to spend 40 years in the desert as a shepherd before he ever stepped into that place of deliverer of God's people. That's a process. Jeremiah, sinking waist deep in a well, left for dead. God, I thought you told me when I was young that I was going to be a mouthpiece to this generation, and now no one can even hear me yelling for help. That's a process Jeremiah had to go through. Can I just encourage you, if you're in that place right now, you're in good company, because every disciple of God finds himself in this place where it feels like the promise has gone to pieces. God's inviting you into a process that will make you someone new. It will get you ready for what he's about to do. This morning, I want you to understand this one thing. If you are faithful through the process, God will be faithful with the promise. If you are faithful to walk through this process with God, God will be faithful to bring his promise to you. One side is our responsibility. The other side is his. We can't do God's part, but we can do our part. Don't take the shortcut. Even if it feels like this is going to take forever, right? That's certainly how Joseph would have felt when he interpreted the cupbearer's dream, and the cupbearer was in prison with him. He knew this meant he was going to get advanced back to working with the Pharaoh again. And he says, hey, remember me. Tell Pharaoh I can interpret dreams. Remember me. And he's like, oh yeah, bro, I got you. Don't worry. I'll totally remember you. And then it says here in Genesis 40, the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream that allowed Joseph to be able to interpret it and get out of jail. 2 full years. 6 months in, you can picture Joseph going, I'm sure the cupbearer is going to remember. I mean, he totally promised me that he would remember. He's probably just kind of getting acclimated again, looking for an opportunity 1 year in. Maybe he's, taking his time, but he's just looking for the right opportunity with the Pharaoh. He doesn't want to rush things. 1.5 years in, he's totally forgotten me. He's not going to tell the Pharaoh. 2 years later, I am stuck here forever, right? That was the process that Joseph was in. Somewhere along the way, he had to discover a couple of things that I'm hoping you and I will as well. To stick with God's plan means we need to make a couple choices. While the grout is being spread over our pieces, the drying process, bringing all of these things together, there's a couple things you and I have to choose. And the first is this: choosing God's dream over the American dream. Yeah, we had the American dream in Seattle. God was faithful. The church was growing. And that was my house right there in Seattle, the beautiful house. And that's the Matson truck backing up to it, loading everything in that house. That's us saying goodbye to our family, because 10 years in, God said, give it all away. I'm calling you to a little place in Kona. I need you to help start a church called New Hope Legacy. 10 years in, I had the American dream. But God, this house and the church is doing really well, and I've got a reputation here, and things are going great, and I need you to give it to me. To go there? Yep. It was a dying process. John, are you saying we can't own stuff? Is that what you're saying? No. I'm just saying we got to be careful, make sure that the American dream hasn't surpassed God's dream. Because the American dream is what? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Well, think about that. Where does life come from? Where does your true liberty lie? And where does happiness, lasting happiness, actually come from, if not from your pursuit of Christ first and above all everything else? Yes, if you own home and family and businesses and cars and wealth, that's awesome as long as it's submitted to the dream of God. But what I realized when God called me to lay that all down again is somewhere along the way of God doing his thing, it became my thing. Somewhere along the way, the pursuit of happiness, I started to realize this is my wishes come true. And it's in this process that you and I have to decide what's the difference between a wish and a God-given dream. You see, Pastor Wayne puts it this way, that a wish is a temporary aspiration, but a God-given dream is your permanent assignment. And you and I have given into a cultural lie that says we deserve to have wish fulfillment instead of finding our fulfillment in Jesus Christ Christ alone. Somewhere along the way, we've flipped the two, and if we're not careful, that becomes an idol. The American dream takes the place of the dream of God. And you and I on this Independence Day need to declare our dependence upon God. And how do we do that? We bring it all back to Him again. Is God going to tell me to sell everything? I don't know. That's between you and God. But the important thing is that God is first in your life, not these other things. And I remember selling that and moving, and because the church was small, I'm now working at Starbucks, making lattes again because I had to get another job, and I don't have my nice car anymore. I'm driving around a moped. Yeah, me and a moped, 4:30 in the morning, driving to make other people lattes, and I'm going, God, what is going on here, right? It was part of the process. Part of the process that He had me in. I don't know what part of the process you're in, but you're going to have to choose which dream you're going after. The second thing that we have to learn in the process, while the ground is being spread and the timing of God is at work, you're going to have to choose to not take matters into your own hands. This is hard, especially when it comes to, it seems like God's taking longer than we think He should. Especially when it comes to relationships. You see, Proverbs 29:18 says that people cast off restraint when they don't have a vision, when they don't have a dream. What's that mean? We will break the law. We will go against our conscience. We will do things and compromise and look for shortcuts that we never would have considered if we lose track of why God has called us here. Joseph had to keep the dream in front of him over and over and over again because he now had a very tempting option to advance himself. Potiphar's wife was putting the moves on him. If he decided to give in to that, that could open some doors for him, some advancement, possibly a raise. If he's making the boss's wife happy, things could turn out well for him. But he ran the other way because he decided, I'm not going to take matters into my own hands. Can I just say right now, young people, I hope you're listening. We do this, especially when it comes to relationships, because it feels like it's taking forever for God to bring that man or that woman that we've been waiting for, that we were praying for, that we know that God has promised. First of all, I want you to understand this. Your value, your worth is not defined by your marital status. But secondly, if God has promised you a man or a woman, let Him bring them. Don't make it happen yourself. And I'm preaching to someone in this room this morning because there's someone in a relationship and you're trying to make it happen ahead of God's timing. And God is saying, go like Joseph and run the other way, because that's not from me. Can I get an amen in the house this morning? Okay, I'm just making sure. Because God's got a relationship for you. Just make sure it's from Him, not something you've done with your own hands, right? And finally, keep an eye on the promiser. Keep an eye on the promiser. I said write down the promise, but it's the promiser that's going to get you through this process, because it feels like it's taken forever. And it's the promiser that you're going to realize is the relationship. The whole point of this process is He's drawing us into a relationship with Himself. And as I've gone through this process now, looking at this, coming up to this milestone, I've realized I am closer to God than ever before because I decided to trust His process, even though it didn't make any sense to my mind. And the reason why I've been reading through my journals is because on July 5th, in a couple days, it's a pretty significant day for the Burgess Ohana. That marks 1 year here as your campus pastors. And we're so glad. We are so glad. We wouldn't want to be anywhere else but right here. And I look at all the things that He had me lay down, and I go, if I would have held on to any of that stuff, I would have missed out on this. And this is bigger than anything I could have imagined, that God will give me an opportunity to serve this Ohana. I never would have saw this. Never. And that's what I want to encourage you in. No matter where your dream is at, no matter how big you think it is, God's dream for you is even bigger. Let Him have it. Watch what He does. It's beautiful. I stand as a testament of that. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And when it's in God's hands, you don't want to be anywhere else either. Because what it's got in store for you is even better than what you have planned. And that's when we see point number 4, the big picture. Yeah, it all starts with a promise. And then God takes the pieces. And through the process, He begins to take all those pieces that we thought were irredeemable, irreplaceable, and He puts it all together and creates something brand new that we never even saw. The big picture is what Joseph now had. He had gone through the process. He had interpreted Pharaoh's dream. And in Genesis 41, it says, so Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. And then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. Joseph was 30 years old. How old was he when he got that dream? You guys remember? 17, that's right. You guys are paying attention. 17 years old. And now he's 30. A 13-year-long process to see it go from the promise to the big picture. Now, what do you mean by big picture? Here's what I mean. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. You see, all of a sudden, those dreams that he had 13 years ago, he realized what they actually meant. It wasn't about him in a high position and everyone bowing down to him. It was about God putting him in a position where he could now serve his family. Because God had given him that place of authority and influence, he was able to save his entire family to generations from past him. God was able to use his influence and his wisdom from the time locked up in jail and resisting temptation and resisting bitterness. God was able to put him to a place of such authority. He was able to, while the rest of the land was in famine, save not only Egypt, but all of Israel, to the point where they were able to grow and thrive. This is when we realize we're at the big picture. The dream was never about me in the first place. It was never about what I can get out of it. It was always about what God can do through it. It was never about what's in it for me, but what is God going to do through me? If God has given you a position of power or authority or wealth or influence, guess what? It's not about you. That fulfillment of that dream, it's for Him. The big picture is, if we've been blessed, it's so we can bless others around us. It wasn't about people bowing down to Joseph. It was Joseph in a position to serve his family and save their lives. And God's got that for each and every one of us. That's why He's so concerned and so determined to see your dream come to pass. Because it's not just about you. It's about those He's going to bless through you. And that's worth contending for. That's worth fighting for. I want to encourage each of you that is in that place that God has that for you. And you can tell when someone has that big picture mindset, when they realize what life is really about. When they realize that when Jesus said, I have not come to be served, but to serve and give my life a ransom for many, that's big picture thinking. It wasn't about Him. It was about what He was going to do to serve all humanity for all eternity. Oh, that's what it's about. And you can tell when someone has the big picture because they live life a little differently. They have a different feel about them. And that's certainly the case with Sister Emmy Alvarez. I don't know, all of you know her, but she served as a volunteer staff for 5 years here in New Hope, and then over the last 5 years as paid staff. And she did so many things around the church, including working with our kapuna, as well as doing hospital visits. And she's like a light. She has a light bulb. Every time you come into Emmy's presence, she's always got a story of God's faithfulness. I have pictures of her because every time I would see her, she'd be like, Pastor John, come, let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you that she right here, she just asked Christ into her heart. Pastor John, come here. Let me tell you what just happened. I was praying for her brother in the hospital, and he got saved, and then I was able to lead the other person to the Lord as well, who was in the hospital room with him. And I'm like, what? I got to take a picture of this. You know, I like pictures. And anyways, she always had a story of God's faithfulness. She's such an evangelist, living out the purposes of God. And then those dreams got shattered when she got news that she had cancer. And she thought, hey, I'm going to be out of this no problem, because she went in and the 2 black masses that they had seen in the x-ray, they had disappeared. And she thought, I'll be out in a week, until they came back with a vengeance. And her body's racked with pain, and so we went over there to pray for her. And you know, you can tell when someone's got the big picture because it's never about them. I go over to pray for her, and I find out she's praying for us. Look at this picture here. You can see in the back there, she's got a prayer wall. I don't know if you guys can tell that, but that's a picture of our building project. I mean, here she is, racked with pain, fighting a deadly disease, and she's praying for the future of this church. And she's got names upon names of people that she's continued for physical healing, that she's continued for salvation and deliverance. All those names on there. How is she spending her time? Not on herself, but for everybody else. And I asked Emmy, I said, Emmy, is your work done? And she said, I asked God the same question when I found out I had cancer. And God said, your work's never done. You bring me wherever you go. And she's got an amazing story. She had the American dream. She had wealth. She had position. She had power. She had influence. And she lost it all. And if you talk to her now, you would think that she's the wealthiest woman in the world because of how she carries herself. There's no victimhood there. There is a woman who knows who she belongs to. Now, is it about whether you have wealth or not? No, it's about someone who knows who they are owned by. You're not owned by your wealth or your position or your power. If you are owned by Jesus Christ, then you can know the same security that she does. And so she looks at it going, okay, if I've got this disease, then no matter where I go, I'm going to start blessing people. So if that's the hospitals, that's where I'm going to bless people. She starts sharing the story about talking with the doctor who goes to another church here on the island, and the doctor's saying, yeah, I don't really have any time to serve the church. And Emmy says, oh, you need to. You're going to miss out on the joy of serving. He's like, what? Oh, yeah. No, there's something that you're not going to have. If you don't make time to serve God at your church, you're going to miss out on a joy that God has for you, right? She's totally talking the New Hope values, and the guy's like, oh, okay. So he comes back later, and he's like, Emmy, guess what? Thanks to you, I'm now serving in children's ministry, and I know the joy that you're talking about that I didn't know before. And I'm like, that's so Emmy, that is just awesome. And then she's being wheeled in for surgery, and the nurse is saying to her, yeah, I've worked with a lot of people that are very sick, and I've never seen anybody with as much joy as you have. How is that possible? And her response, I've got 24/7 access to the God of the universe. I am never alone. Whether I'm on the operating table or I'm at home, I am never alone. Now that's someone who's got the big picture. She said, I don't have to be afraid. Whether I'm here on earth or I'm in heaven, I know who I belong to, and I know where I'm going to go, so I don't have any fear. And fear is what steals your joy. So you can know it too. And she's full on witnessing to this nurse. And I'm just like, that's the big picture. She's got it. And she told me, she's like, John, the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is the same power that can get me out of this bed if he so chooses. And I want to invite you to something this morning. I want to invite you to not only pray that God would heal Emmy of this evil disease of cancer, but that God would give you the same big picture that she has. I mean, I look at her example and I just go, when I get sniffles, I don't even want to be around people. And she's fighting cancer and she's blessing everywhere that she's going. Well, I feel like my whole world falls apart when things start getting complicated. She's fighting a ravaging disease, and she's blessing everybody with the joy of the Lord. What's my excuse? Usually it's just because I have small thinking, and I need to get back to the big picture. What God was doing in Joseph, what God is doing in the De La Cruz Ohana, God's doing in Sister Emmy, what God wanted to do with me and bringing me to Kona so he could get me ready for here, this is what he's doing in you. The reason why you're here this morning is because he wants to give you the big picture of why you're here this morning.